Hi, this is Andre Bester, and you're joining me on This Is What We Were Told. On this channel, I'm talking about issues of faith that seriously challenged my belief in the integrity of the Bible. In 2020, I published a book on my spiritual journey called This Is What We Were Told. The aim with my book was to challenge people to look beyond the limitations of religious belief and to take in the bigger picture of the wonder of life. On this channel, I want to give viewers a taste of the topics I cover in my book. On this channel and through my book, I want to awaken people to the wonders of life playing out right around them, just beyond the boundaries of faith. So please stick around and maybe you discover something useful here. Last time I started with a talk on how belief became embedded in society and why people are convinced that their religion and faith are unshakable and justified. I spoke about the development and cementing of belief and how geographical and cultural elements played a role in this process. Today I want to conclude this talk by looking at how humankind's ability to write and read gave further momentum to the embedding of belief, and how an invisible phenomenon called confirmation bias gives us reason to keep on believing. The development of humankind's ability to reduce thought to writing and to read one another's writing certainly pushed the embedding of religious belief into overdrive. Before we were able to write, we had no choice but to store information as brain memory. Information was retrieved by way of memory recall and relayed by word of mouth. Of course, this way of managing factual information is fraught with all sorts of difficulties that render the integrity of the information questionable. Writing introduced two powerful enhancements to the chronicling of information. Firstly, putting down something in writing has a way of giving that something a life of its own. I had a boss who used to say, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. There's some truth in this. Once something is in writing, it is concretized and somehow demands recognition. Writing allows us access to the thoughts someone else had, perhaps ages ago, letting us hear those thoughts as though they are spoken now. Secondly, writing ensures a higher level of accuracy in the transfer of knowledge. Writing reduces the risk of watering down or embellishment of facts. Writing can thus become a powerful tool in handing down precise information about a religion, its rituals, and its tenets. Just consider the following fictitious practical scenario. A small tribe of primitive, uneducated individuals comes to the realization that often after they have performed activity A, result B miraculously and inexplicably occurs. Let's say, for the sake of example, that activity A is the slaughtering of a bull, and that result B is a period of peace and stability in the village. In line with humankind's natural tendency to identify patterns and assign agency, this group reasons that there must be some mysterious link between activity A and result B. They don't know precisely what the link is because it is not physically observable. So the agent sitting behind this occurrence must be some super being. All that they know with certainty is that result B is very beneficial or useful to them. So bearing in mind their perceived divine link between activity A and result B, What do you think will they do in order to get more B? Of course, they'll conclude that they must do more A. And that is exactly what they'll do. And they'll teach their children about the pattern they've perceived and what needs to be done in order to have more B. These norms and rituals get handed down from generation to generation, each successive generation accepting them unconditionally and unquestioningly as a natural part of their frame of reference. We already spoke about this phenomenon in episode 5, where I referred to religion and faith as being an implicit part of every believer's metaphorical personal landscape. Unquestioning acceptance of these norms and rituals effectively embeds them as an inextricable part of the community. Humankind's mastery of writing and reading enables the faithful to record the norms and rituals that need to be observed in order to have a life of prosperity or, at the very least, contentment. From this moment, these norms and rituals become available to all future generations to learn firsthand what needs to be done in order to have a happy, successful life. They just have to study the records and do what it tells them to do. Et voila, we have a formalized belief system. But all the factors I mentioned up to now still require a further element that binds them together to unlock the full potential of religious belief, a phenomenon called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is our natural tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of our existing beliefs or theories. Confirmation bias is an extremely powerful phenomenon when it comes to religious belief. Let's look at how confirmation bias affirms our religious beliefs. What is it that gives us practical validation of the promises and principles taught by our religious beliefs? It is real life events. Our experience with real life events practically demonstrates and gives shape to the promises and principles of the religious beliefs we adhere to. Real life events prove why our faith is justified and why our religious beliefs are the truth. Here's how it works. Daily reality presents us with a continuous stream of situations and events that have the potential to validate the tenets of our own belief system. Those situations and events that have potential to validate the tenets of our beliefs are extremely useful because those are the very things that practically and tangibly demonstrate to us why it is worth our while to believe in whatever it is that we believe. We therefore obviously derive direct and immediate value from the real life events and situations that support our belief systems. They make it easy for us to say that this or that is proof of the involvement or providence of the God in whom we believe. And the examples are endless. Someone somehow survives an illness that would normally be fatal, and suddenly this is proof that the prayers of those who prayed for healing were heard. A person is spared some or other calamity, and it gets attributed to the prayers of the faithful having been answered. Someone prays for calm, wisdom, and a clear mind before writing an exam and then passes. This suddenly becomes evidence that the prayer has been answered. The splendor of a beautiful sunrise or the magnificence of the cosmos suddenly becomes testimony to the hand of God at work. And even in the case of an entirely uneventful day, believers might say that it was God who provided in their needs and protected them from harm on that day. I always cringe when I hear examples like these because I invariably think to myself what the implication would have been if God did not give that person what he or she was praying for. Obviously, they're telling this story in order to say that God was good for them in this way. But if God did not give them what they were praying for, would that imply that God was mean to them? Believers probably don't think about it like this. But still, would they be telling this story if they prayed for something they did not realize? I guess not. I have some personal experience with the effects of confirmation bias. In 1980, when I was a young boy, I contracted a very rare and deadly autoimmune disease called Stevens-Johnson syndrome. It came very suddenly and violently, like a bolt of lightning out of clear blue sky. I broke out in blisters all over my body, but the blistering particularly ravaged my mucous membranes. I was hospitalized, but doctors quarantined me because they were unfamiliar with my condition and they feared for the possibility of contagion. It took about 3 days before one of my doctors diagnosed Stevens-Johnson syndrome. By that time, I was already unconscious and on life support. Having a diagnosis did not change much because the disease is untreatable. It has to rage itself out while the patient receives symptomatic support. During those years, a diagnosis of Stevens-Johnson syndrome was pretty much a death sentence. Very few patients survived it. Doctors could do nothing further for me, and it became a waiting game. I already mentioned in a previous talk that my parents were very devout Christians, and they still are. They immediately got a prayer movement going, and a lot of people in various towns across South Africa were praying for my recovery. Obviously, the fact that I'm here talking to you means that I eventually did recover. To this day, my dear parents firmly believe the only reason why I'm alive today is because God brought about a miracle in my life. The miracle came because so many prayers went up for me. Where does confirmation bias come into this picture? You see, I have a very different perspective on this life-changing event. I remember very little of being sick, so I guess my own psychological trauma was limited. However, this disease completely and permanently ruined my body. The blistering in my lungs was very severe, and the sores became infected. Long after the Stevens-Johnson syndrome had dissipated, I was still plagued by chronic lung infection in both lungs, and the most hideous phlegm had to be drained from my lungs every day. My left lung in particular was badly damaged. In 1981, it was decided that it would be best for me to have my left lung removed. So at the tender age of 12 years, I underwent major surgery. The operation left a large and unsightly scar on my left flank, still clearly visible today. The operation proved successful because after that, my health started improving and I started growing and gaining weight. However, to this day, I still sit with permanent damage to my right lung. Its function is also impaired, and I get only about 65% of the function that a normal pair of lungs should be delivering. I get out of breath pretty quickly when I physically exert myself, but that's no excuse for not having a physically active life. I simply had to adapt to what my right lung could accommodate. Fortunately, I'm mostly unaware of my lung condition. In the years following my disease, I developed scoliosis in my back. I don't know this for a fact, but I have a pretty strong suspicion this might have something to do with the way in which surgeons gained access to my chest cavity to remove my left lung, and maybe also the empty space that was left after my lung was removed. As I'm aging, I find increasingly that my back is causing me discomfort. The disease also targeted my eyes. The blistering caused severe scarring inside my tear drainage ducts, which caused them to permanently fuse shut. I once underwent surgery to reopen these drainage ducts, but it was unsuccessful. So ever since this disease, I've had to manually drain the tears out of my eyes every few minutes. People with normal tear drainage ducts aren't even aware that their eyes constantly produce tears, because their tears immediately drain away through these drainage ducts into their sinuses. I'm not that lucky. I literally have to wipe my eyes with a handkerchief every now and then, which is extremely embarrassing because over the years, lots of people simply concluded that I must be a very emotional kind of person who cries for the slightest thing. It is infuriating to hear people asking me why I'm crying. I know they're probably asking this out of innocent concern, but still it upsets me very badly. And, of course, constantly wiping your eyes is a very bad habit because over the long term it causes damage to your eyes. So you see, this disease left me with permanent damage in so many ways. In my own mind, a miracle from God should have been a full, complete recovery from this disease. After all, the Christian God is depicted as a God of complete miracles. You can go check this out for yourself in the first 4 books of the New Testament in the Bible. The Christian God is not known for doing things in half measures. Why then perform a miracle in my life only halfway? It makes no sense to me whatsoever. A true miracle from God should have left me fully recovered without a trace of what had happened. This is why I do not think that my recovery was due to any miracle. But my personal experience regarding this bigger picture seems to be completely obscured to my parents. It's right in front of them, but I don't think they see it. Of course, they know every little detail of what I went through, but what seems to stick with them is the part where my condition was beyond treatment, where prayers went up for me, where the disease dissipated, and where my health improved. All the other issues I mention here seem to be of little consequence in the picture they're holding on to. Having said that, I will never fault my parents for their belief. Being a parent myself, I can only try to imagine the weight of the psychological trauma my parents must have gone through with my illness and subsequent health issues. And yet, they always bravely soldiered on. I have only the greatest respect for them, for the courage and devotion they have shown under very trying conditions. Okay, this story brings me to the flip side of the confirmation bias coin. The one side of the coin says that the positive things that happen to us are useful to confirm and validate our faith. But the flip side of the coin is also true. We have no use for situations or events that cannot support our belief system. These situations and events come and go, and because they are of no value in terms of supporting our belief system, we simply discard them. This process does not necessarily happen on a conscious level. In fact, I think it mostly happens on a subconscious level. An event or situation presents itself, and because it is so unremarkable or mundane, we simply and automatically move along to the next moment. At the end of a really uneventful day, the faithful can, at best, say that God provided in their needs for that day and that He protected them against harm. There's really nothing further that can possibly be said that could further justify their faith as far as an uneventful day is concerned. But there's more to the flip side. An event or situation might occur that is so unbearable or destructive that it cannot possibly validate our faith in any way. Just think, for example, somebody is critically ill and loved ones unite in prayer for his healing and restoration, and then the person dies. A person embarks on a long-distance journey and family and friends pray for her safe arrival, only to learn that she has been killed in a horrifying crash. Someone prays for calm, wisdom, and a clear mind before writing an exam, and then spectacularly fails. Someone prays for job security in a time of economic downturn, only to find out that he is being retrenched. How can any of these examples possibly serve as proof to ourselves and others why it is worth our while to believe in whatever we believe? There's just no way. Imagine telling someone, I believe in God because I prayed to Him for His protection, and then somebody broke into my house, raped me, and killed my husband. That's just not going to fly. In fact, these examples are harmful in terms of their potential to validate our beliefs. Therefore, we consciously prefer to rather put these events behind us as quickly as possible. But here's something curious. Even in case of adversity, confirmation bias can find a way to wriggle its slimy self into our thinking. How often do you hear someone facing a time of great difficulty say that they are finding their strength in God, or that God is healing their wounds? So even in adversity, confirmation bias will turn our eyes to the smallest things that could validate our faith. How amazing is that? The hard truth is that everybody has to work through the trauma of loss at some point in their lives. And with or without God, it is almost inevitable that most of us will eventually arrive at a point of consolation and acceptance. It's just how we are. But somehow our ability to process a loss suddenly becomes evidence of the providence of God. What strange creatures we are. There is one last aspect of confirmation bias that we dare not miss. Confirmation bias tends to blind us to the incidents and situations where our faith is really not paying off. Because we're so blissfully ignorant to them, perhaps it is necessary to throw the spotlight on them a bit. Here's the bigger picture. There's a raging torrent of prayer that is constantly going up for a multitude of things. But do we give it a thought how many of these prayers actually deliver the outcome we pray for? Just think within your own circle of family, friends, and acquaintances of somebody who passed away after a sick bed. How many people do you think were praying for that person's recovery? 10? 20? 50? And how many prayers? Probably hundreds. And not a single one of them resulted in the desired outcome. How many prayers go up for the poor and the needy? Probably billions. And do we see the poor and the needy being rescued out of their situation? No. For every poor person who makes it out of hardship, There are countless others who enter poverty and hardship. What about prayers for people to come to the faith? For everyone who accepts the faith, there are dozens of others who go astray. What about prayers for peace and safety? How has that been working in countries with high crime rates? Did things get better? It doesn't seem like it. The list of examples can go on. Prayers for corrupt governments, prayers for apathetic leaders, prayers for rain, prayers for children, prayers for healing, prayers to win battles, and even prayers to win sports competitions. How many of those prayers bring the outcome that is prayed for? The truth? Not much. In fact, I'd venture to say very few. I'm convinced the number of prayers that are thought to have resulted in the desired outcome are completely dwarfed by the number of prayers that simply did not pay off. So where does this leave us? I think confirmation bias robs us of the ability to see the massive gaps in respect of prayers that we prayed where the desired outcome did not realize. Most of the things we pray for do not come to fruition, but we don't notice it because confirmation bias has fixed our attention on something else that better supports our beliefs. Confirmation bias completely blows out of proportion those instances where we think our prayers have rendered the desired outcome. We feel this generously validates our beliefs. We think we see a continuum of answered prayers, whilst in fact we really are facing a continuum of gaps with blips of perceived answers in between. Confirmation bias is a very cruel con artist, and most of us aren't even aware of it. Our history of coming to believe in certain things is perhaps mysterious, but my common sense tells me that it is explainable based on facts far removed from the influence of some or other deity. In essence, our early ancestors were desperate for explanations of the world in which they lived and the day-to-day challenges they faced. They thought they recognized certain patterns in the events playing out around them. In the absence of scientific explanation, they concluded that certain deities were the agents driving the events playing out around them. They developed certain rituals aimed at keeping those deities appeased. They handed down the information about these deities and the rituals to be followed to subsequent generations by word of mouth. Unquestioning acceptance of this information by successive generations helped to embed the information as generally accepted belief. With the arrival of the ability to write and read, the information was penned down. This elevated the status of these beliefs by making them more regulated and structured. At the same time, it also gave the beliefs a certain eternal value, in the sense that it could now be studied and closely followed by all future generations. Confirmation bias cemented the beliefs in our everyday lives because faith rewarded is faith intensified. In our everyday lives, numerous events play out around us that we can point out as proof that our beliefs are justified and correct. But because we're biased, we miss the massive gaps caused by events and circumstances that either have no validatory value or that contradict our beliefs. Humankind's unquenchable thirst for greater control over his surroundings, his well-being, and his destiny heightened his senses to perceive patterns in the events that played out around him. His powers of observation and deductive reasoning enabled him to draw conclusions based on the patterns he thought he perceived, even if those conclusions were sometimes completely devoid of any logic. This is the way in which humankind became the creator and at the same time also the slave of religion. This is Andri Bester for This Is What We Were Told. If you're interested in a copy of my book, mail me at the address on the screen and I'll be in touch. Have a lovely day.